The latest news from the Project Zomboid team is all about the brand new and groundbreaking crafting system that will change the game fundamentally. They begin by talking about their inspirations when creating this new crafting system. Apparently, the freedom and possibility of the popular and extensive tech progression mod packs for Minecraft have given them many ideas on what they would like to have in their own game. Of course, as they note, Project Zomboid is a post-apocalyptic survival game, and it would be a little strange if us survivors were able to build things like nuclear reactors or portals. So what they really mean is that they want to capture that feeling of building, expanding, obtaining materials, and navigating a huge crafting tree that is formed from the resources you have available and will open up into even more trees and grant all kinds of new aspects of gameplay to the player. It is also said that this will be mixed in with a heavy focus on role-playing, mostly with multiplayer but also for single-player with NPCs once those are added. They say that they sort of have a parallel vision with these Minecraft mods, but theirs is more focused on realism and also leveraging skills and professions, which means you will need the help of your friends or NPCs who have the appropriate skill set to get certain things done. Since NPCs are likely coming after Build 42, they also put that they will make sure to adequately provide sandbox options and probably the builder main menu mode to not lock this stuff out of the single player experience. Next, they move on to talk about how while they want this new crafting system to be extensive, they also want it to be believable. They want to make it so you won't run into a weird scenario where a burger flipper character is somehow able to craft crazy recipes involving beeswax and crushed limestone, which would take much away from the immersion of the game. The type of thing they are going for that would make sense, however, is, for example, if you are a metalworking character, you should be able to make things like spoons. This may seem like a strange thing to craft in a world full of spoons, but their goal is to eventually make it so you never need to rely on looted items to survive long in the apocalypse and never need to reset your world unless you really want to. To summarize, they plan on making certain crafting recipes only available to certain occupations in a realistic way to add a new sense of co-op to the game, but at the same time providing good opportunities to learn those things your character doesn't know, so that you don't need to go searching the whole map for that one thing you need. This probably won't have an effect on a good amount of the things we can already craft in the game, so don't worry about potentially not being able to craft something specific you usually make without choosing an occupation you don't like playing as. After that, they briefly touch on the topic of how they are trying really hard to make sure that the crafting system is both super in-depth with multiple crafting stages, methods, and things like that, but also at the same time not making it tedious or something to dread while playing. They say it is quite hard to balance this, especially with their desire to honor the realism of the game, but they are currently in the process of consolidating some of these steps, while of course still keeping the concept of multiple skills, professions, and processes to keep it interesting. They then show us our first look at a portion of the crafting trees. Ooh. They continue on by going more in detail about how they will be coming up with other ways that players can learn skills. Apparently, Build 42 will include a vastly expanded skill list, and they need more ways to level up those skills. The current method of reading a skill book and then just building a bunch of stuff over and over again to gain XP is admittedly not a very fun way of going about this. One new way of learning skills that they have been looking into deeply is being able to learn recipes or gain XP by simply watching another player or NPC make something. Again, in the meantime, before NPCs get introduced, they promise to include adequate sandbox settings to allow solo players access to these new features since they won't have another character to interact with. Another new method of learning recipes might be that when you learn one thing, it may have other recipes linked to it that perhaps share the same concept as what you just made, and those will get unlocked as well. Another big reason why they are trying to come up with more methods of learning things is because they have this really cool plan to make it possible to play on a blank wilderness map with nothing but raw resources. They also plan on potentially making it so you can start your game, say, 100 years into the apocalypse when the skill books probably aren't around anymore. This does remind me a lot of the mod 10 Years Later by Dane, which I recommend you check out. The next thing discussed is how modders will have the opportunity to go wild and actually create crazy things like that nuclear reactor mentioned earlier with this new crafting system, because if an empty wilderness map does become a viable way to play, then the modding community won't be restricted by the zombie aspect of the game and can make it into more of a Factorio-like experience if they so please. The Project Zomboid team has kept all of the scripts and LUA that modders are used to, but they have expanded upon them greatly and expect the possibilities to grow dramatically once the community has access to it. The final thing they talk about is the new post-apocalyptic professions that will be coming. This will be for that idea I just mentioned where you'll be able to start your playthrough many years into the apocalypse when technology has regressed and the professions would be a bit more rustic and cover things like leather tanning, glue or soap making, spinning wool, making clothing, bow making, glass making, and stonemasonry, just to name some. Those things will of course be all the stuff that will allow you to keep a post-apocalyptic town up and running with your friends. You'll even potentially be able to trade with other groups too. Unfortunately, the whole idea of starting a new game that takes place years after the Nox event will sadly unlikely be developed before Build 42 comes out because they have a lot to work on already and making this new game mode would require lots more work. For instance, just trying to make the world look more degraded and eroded would be a huge task in itself, not to mention the other changes to the map and the loot you can find. They then go on to wrap it up by saying it is not clear to them whether or not they'll be able to have everything they've designed come out together in the first unstable release of Build 42. It is possible we will at first only get the base things in there and then a long, unstable release cycle will follow, which will add in the rest of the small stuff until it is officially fully published. This is because they will naturally need a lot of tile and item artwork done for the many new things being added. So, this week's Thursdoid was pretty special. We finally got a super close look at this massive new crafting system that is coming our way. To me, the most exciting part that we covered is the idea of being able to survive on a completely empty map with nothing but raw resources. The whole thing about having a thriving community in the years after the start of the apocalypse is also super cool to me, and I can just tell that these things alone will change the way that people play the game so much, and I can't wait for that. Now for the question. What did you find most exciting about this week's news from the Project Zomboid team? I'd love to hear your answers in the comments.